Picture yourself in a Psych 101 class. The professor mentions operant and classical conditioning, and suddenly it feels like you're lost in a labyrinth of psychological jargon. It's a common experience. These two terms, seemingly simple, often emerge as complex and confusing concepts in the minds of many learners. They're like two sides of a coin, distinct yet part of a whole, making them a common source of bewilderment. But don't worry, this video is your compass, guiding you out of the labyrinth. We're going to delve into the world of psychology, unraveling the mysteries of operant and classical conditioning. We'll journey through the thoughts of Pavlov and Skinner, pioneers who laid the groundwork for these fundamental concepts. We aim to transform these complex terms into digestible nuggets of knowledge, making your educational journey smoother and more enjoyable. By the end of this video, the fog of confusion that once clouded your understanding of operant and classical conditioning will be lifted. Classical conditioning, also known as Pavlovian conditioning, might ring a bell. Perhaps a bell that makes you think of salivating dogs? Now let's dive into it. The Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov, while studying digestion in dogs, stumbled upon this fascinating concept. He noticed that dogs would start salivating when they saw the lab assistant who usually fed them. He then conducted an experiment, pairing the sound of a bell, a neutral stimulus, with the presentation of food, a stimulus that naturally caused salivation. After repeating this pairing several times, Pavlov found that the dogs started to salivate just at the sound of the bell, even without the presence of food. This, my friends, is classical conditioning in action, a process of learning through association where a neutral stimulus becomes capable of eliciting a response that was originally caused by another stimulus. So, in a nutshell, classical conditioning is all about learning through association. Now, let's shift gears to operant conditioning, the brainchild of B.F. Skinner. This intriguing concept is all about learning from the consequences of our actions. It's a fascinating dance of cause and effect, where our behavior is shaped by rewards and punishments. Imagine you're trying to teach your dog to sit. Each time the dog sits on command, you reward it with a treat. Over time, the dog learns that sitting on command equals tasty rewards. This is a classic example of positive reinforcement, a key component of operant conditioning. On the flip side, consider a child who touches a hot stove and gets burned. The pain serves as a punishment, teaching the child to avoid touching hot surfaces in the future. This is known as positive punishment. So operant conditioning is about learning through consequences, quite a different approach from our friend Pavlov's method. Before we move on to contrasting classical and operant conditioning, let's delve deeper into the concepts of positive and negative reinforcement, as well as positive and negative punishment. These terms may sound complex, but they are quite straightforward once you understand the basic principles. First, let's tackle positive reinforcement. This happens when something is added, like a reward, and as a result, a behavior increases. Remember our dog sitting for a treat? That's positive reinforcement in action. Next, we have negative reinforcement. Here, something is removed, and this leads to an increase in behavior. Imagine your car's annoying seatbelt not fastened beep. It stops when you buckle up, encouraging you to always fasten your seatbelt. The removal of the irritating sound increases the behavior of buckling up. Moving on to positive punishment. This is when something is added, resulting in a decrease in behavior. Take the child who touches the hot stove. The addition of pain reduces the likelihood of touching hot surfaces. And finally, negative punishment. This occurs when something is removed, leading to a decrease in behavior. Think of a teenager who stays out past curfew and loses driving privileges. The removal of driving rights decreases the behavior of breaking curfew. It's important to note that punishment and reinforcement from a behavioral perspective are neutral terms. It's all about the effect on behavior. If behavior increases after the consequence is delivered, it is called reinforcement. If behavior decreases after the consequence is delivered, it is called punishment. So, whether it's reinforcement or punishment, positive or negative, it all boils down to the impact on behavior and whether something was added or removed. These principles are key to understanding how operant conditioning shapes our actions. Now that we've taken a closer look at both classical and operant conditioning, it's time to pit them against each other. In the red corner, we have classical conditioning, discovered by Ivan Pavlov, where learning is passive. The learner doesn't need to make any conscious decisions. They just need to associate two stimuli. The response here is automatic, like salivating when you smell your favorite food. In the blue corner, we have operant conditioning, B.F. Skinner's brainchild, where learning is active. The learner must make a decision to perform a certain behavior. The response is voluntary, like deciding to study more after getting a good grade. Now let's look at the stimuli. In classical conditioning, the stimulus comes before the response and is independent of the learner's behavior. However, in operant conditioning, the consequence comes after the response, and if the learner's behavior subsequently increases, it is called reinforcement. Conversely, if the behavior then decreases, it is called punishment. Differences aside, both these theories are powerhouses in the field of psychology. They have given us invaluable insights into how we learn, react, and adapt to our environment. But remember, in classical conditioning, we're dealing with automatic responses to stimuli, while in operant conditioning, we're looking at voluntary behaviors and the consequences that reinforce or discourage them. So, while both forms of conditioning play a vital role in learning, they do so in distinct ways. The labyrinth of psychological jargon no longer seems so intimidating, does it? We've journeyed through the realm of conditioning, unmasking the differences between classical and operant conditioning. To recap, classical conditioning, thanks to Pavlov, is all about learning through associations, while operant conditioning, courtesy of Skinner, involves learning through consequences. So whether it's the chime of a bell or the prospect of reward or punishment, it's all about conditioning. And with that, the mystery of conditioning is no longer a mystery at all.